I'm FDRawr. I stream myself losing at games like Dead by Daylight over on Twitch, and occasionally make YouTube videos about things that are rattling around in my noggin. This is what's called a video game cartridge. It's a physical form of media that is growing increasingly rare in modern society. The game in this cartridge was made in 1998, and there are zero modifications to it, except for a little wear and tear, as you can see. It is the exact same game as it was released in 1998. You see, in a long forgotten time, video games were products rather than services. What does that mean? Well, a product is something you can take with you from the seller, like that cartridge. Whereas a service is something that you receive in real time from the seller, as is the case with games like Overwatch 1.5. Without connection to Blizzard Entertainment via the internet, you don't actually have the game Overwatch, or even the digital items you paid for in-game. So when did this happen? Is it going to keep happening? Is there any way to stop it? Would we as consumers like the results of stopping it if we could? Let's do some digging. To talk about this issue, we're going to have to clear up a few terms. For example, product. A product is a tangible item that can be purchased and then entirely owned by the customer. When you buy a product, you can give it away or keep it for yourself or leave it in the packaging for collector purposes. Like this comic book. No matter what the writer says or does or feels, they are unable to come take this book from me and revise it. This book is how it was when it was released, and it is mine and mine alone because it is a product. A service is quite the opposite. Think Netflix. By paying a monthly fee, you have access to countless movies and TV shows. However, you don't actually own anything. You can't physically take those movies with you legally when you stop sending money to Netflix. Though many of the titles on Netflix can be purchased in a physical form by going through Netflix, the customer forfeits all ownership of the media in exchange for a live service. Video games predate the internet by about 30 years or so, so out of necessity, they were inherently aligned with the product side of things. Even after the internet began picking up steam in the 90s, video games were largely unaffected until around the 2000s. But we're missing a lot of history here. Let's clear that up. Any kind of recounting of this kind of history is always going to be imperfect, but I'll do my best to keep it honest and faithful with the true world. Game-breaking bugs have always existed. Video games are digital media, and digital media has always been a little tricky. One wrong value in a line of code can completely crash a computer and render it useless, so the need to update software found in games has always existed. But the switch from a product to service really begins with expansion packs. So what are expansion packs? Well, in general, they're supplementary content added to an existing game. While the primary purpose was, well, expansion of the game, these often came with any bug fixes the developers wanted to implement. My favorite example of this is the game Sonic and Knuckles, which was both an expansion pack for prior Sonic the Hedgehog titles as well as its own standalone game. By playing the cartridge with another one plugged into the top, such as Sonic the Hedgehog 1, 2, or 3, players could live through revised levels in the classic games and even play them as a new character, Knuckles. In terms of video gaming history, this was monumental. It was a spectacle. I didn't get to play it until a few years after its release, but even in 1997, the tech was pretty impressive. As much as I loved it, this was the beginning of the end for our precious gaming industry. You see, as products, video games had to go through a rigorous bug testing and had to be cleared for a full-on release day, after which the project was done, completed, scrapped, and time to move on to the next project. However, as the internet became a bigger and bigger part of modern society, and as video game expansions grew in popularity, the two became intertwined into a bold new money-making strategy that I think could best be demonstrated by the rise of MMOs like World of Warcraft or Phantasy Star Online. So we'd survived the 90s, and though expansion packs definitely grew in prominence, video games are still mainly products that can just be purchased to own, but that would all change when WoW hits the market. Who would have thought Blizzard Entertainment would be involved in any of this? Anyone who owned a computer capable of playing video games was on World of Warcraft in 2004 to 2007, which was basically the entire time I was in high school. I must confess, I even tried to play it on a LimeWire infested laptop once. The model of the game was great. The game was a live one, so friends could meet up with each other from the comfort of their own homes rather than the cumbersome task of couch co-op. And if a game-breaking bug came up, there was no need to push out an expansion to fix it, as live games can easily be patched on the go. However, for this model to be sustainable, it's impossible to charge a one-time fee, as one would do with other video games. This kind of gaming required a constantly working team that could not easily take off and work on separate projects. So the purchase fee is replaced with a subscription fee, a monthly recurring charge that keeps the lights on for the developers and allows them to revise and hone their art. This also meant that consumers could directly make complaints to the developers that could then be worked on and addressed in real time rather than being lost on the drawing board for a sequel. Ah, sequels. Another casualty in the switch from a product to service. We'll save that thought for another video. But so far, what's the big deal, FDRawr? Seems like this switch comes with a lot of upsides. I mean, live updates fixing glitches, the reduction of crunch-style development cycles, the freedom for an artist to see through on their vision over time rather than having to release and abandon a project on the same day. What's so bad about that? So far, we've discussed video games in terms of products and services and as works of art, but we haven't touched much on the economic side of things. You see, this games as a service model is part of a much more broad phenomenon called planned obsolescence. When I was younger, I was asked by an elderly guitar and banjo technician to help him in moving houses. I was paid entirely in instruments and sage advice. But one thing that stood out to me in this process was the age of his refrigerator and washing machine. They were ancient, and I knew my family was in a tough financial spot due to our much newer washing machine giving out. I asked the sage if he had to do a lot of work to keep those things running, and he said to me, "No, I bought these before companies realized that building things to last was a bad business model." Kind of a paraphrase. Planned obsolescence is a phenomenon in capitalist economies wherein products are designed purposefully flawed so that another product can be produced in the future to replace it. This practice is generally looked down upon, but a company being known to purposefully plan obsolescence will generally not see any tangible consequences. I mean, are iPhones any less popular now than they were 8 years ago? The modern video gaming industry is primarily ran out of countries with capitalist economies and therefore are going to be subject to this economic trend. This is why you see yearly Call of Duty releases. This is why my Nintendo 64 controllers from 1996 are still functioning perfectly, while my Nintendo Switch Joy-Cons have had to be replaced 3 times already. There was a saying at the old diesel auto shop I used to work at in the Air Force: Ford doesn't make cars, they make car parts. I think that's a perfect summary of planned obsolescence. I used to play Call of Duty a lot, and I remember falling out of love with the series around the time that I noticed that they would have DLC, which is the digital version of expansion packs, available for purchase on day 1. But it existed on release day, meaning Activision had to intentionally cut things out of the game to have more to sell to you. On release day, your full payment for a full-sized AAA game only garnered you about 70% or sometimes less of the actual game they made. But this seems like a perfect contradiction to the games as a service model, doesn't it? Well, no. To use the infamous Blizzard Entertainment to tie these two concepts together, when you bought Overwatch 1, whether digitally or physically, while you couldn't play it without being connected to the live service, almost everything in the game was obtainable for free, aside from the literal pro skins that were sold to generate revenue for a team. I bought my copy for $30, and if there was a skin I wanted, playing the game enough would get me a decent shot at getting it. And every single new character was added to my roster the second they were released. Of course, there was the option to buy loot boxes and try to get a better chance at a skin you wanted, and that was its own predatory practice with its own demerits to address. But the point was, by buying Overwatch, I now had access to every actual advantage I could have in the game and was only limited by my own ability to play, or lack of ability to play. However, with the release of Overwatch 1.5, which is less of a sequel and more of a transition in business practices, new characters have been relegated to battle passes, and while technically they are able to be earned with no money, folks who buy the battle pass have an instant access to the new characters, providing any paying customers a day 1 advantage on non-paying customers. These battle passes are recurring subscription fees like those found in World of Warcraft. However, rather than granting you what you're paying for, you still have to progress through the game to earn your rewards. I use air quotes on rewards because it's skins you paid for by buying the battle pass. You pay for skins by buying the battle pass, and then they still make you earn them. This is what Blizzard thinks modern gaming should look like. And while most battle passes will at least allow players to earn the fake currency necessary to buy the next battle pass, a kind of reward for actually playing, Overwatch 1.5 does no such thing, meaning your battle pass becomes completely obsolete the day a new one is released. I don't need to over-explain how much of a throat punch this is to gamers because there's a million videos doing exactly that, but trust me, this decision isn't for the consumers, it's for the bigwigs. Well, that sounds bleak, and it is. It's a cash-grabbing scheme that robs consumers for the sake of making more sweet, sweet money. Though this trend is being called out more and more, I don't believe it will go away anytime soon. As this video discussed, on the developer side of things, this change can actually have a lot of positive impact on the industry. Crunches are a very real thing and a form of abuse, so I'm certain that a lot of developers would prefer a model that doesn't require extremely strict deadlines. I also believe that once you've opened Pandora's box and shown an industry just how poorly it can treat its customers without being financially impacted, or worse, getting more revenue while doing these practices, the fight is over and the corps have won this one. The only thing that will change the minds of folks at places like Blizzard Entertainment is to see numbers shrink. But I mean, Overwatch is still a fun game. I couldn't possibly advise a boycott that I wouldn't even have the will to participate in. My only advice would be to support smaller creators and developers, spend a little more time getting lost in a full world rather than grinding battle passes. Rather than showing these companies how much we hate their practices, why don't we show them how much we love other ones? Go replay Undertale, spend another night in Morrowind, learn to speedrun Ocarina of Time. One day, video games were a thing that you held in your hand, and today they're simply concepts that exist in the ether known as the internet. There's one thing these companies don't seem to have much vision on though, and that's the time-honored tradition of video game sharing. When my daughter is older, I'll be able to hand her down my copy of Pokemon Yellow and ensure she gets the exact same experience that I got. And when that day comes, Overwatch as it exists today won't be there. Live service games lack that longevity. Once the servers are gone, so is the game. But this copy of Pokemon Yellow version will always be mine until I choose to give it away. Thanks for watching. If you did watch, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe and do all those YouTube things to help this channel grow. Or come check out the fun live on my Twitch channel, FDRawr, and come mess with me while I'm playing. Either way, I'm FDRawr, and I hope you all get exactly what you want for your birthdays.